call comes at 4:51 in the morning. You're sleeping on your couch with your shoes still on because you fell asleep studying for a licensing exam that no longer matters. The phone is face down on your chest. You feel it buzz before you hear it, and for 1 second, the last clean second you'll ever have, you think it might be your father calling to tell you he missed his flight. It isn't. The voice on the line is calm in the way that trained voices are calm. A detective. He says your father's name once, the way you say a name when you already know the answer. He says the word accident, but there is a pause before it. A pause so small that you almost don't catch it, and in that pause lies everything that is about to change. You drive to the hospital even though there is no reason to. He was gone before the ambulance arrived. A single-car collision on a private road that doesn't appear on any navigation app you've ever used, 12 miles outside the city, at 2:17 in the morning. Your father, who told you he was in Chicago for a medical supply convention. Your father, who hadn't driven himself anywhere in 3 years because he always had a car waiting. You sit in a white plastic chair in a white hallway for 4 hours. Nobody bothers you. Nobody explains anything. And then a man you've never seen before sits down beside you, sets a manila envelope on your knee, and says your full name like a password. Your father left instructions, he says, for exactly this situation. You open the envelope. Inside, there's a key, a handwritten address, and 2 sentences in your father's handwriting. The sentences don't explain anything. They just say, go alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. You go. The address takes you to a building in an industrial neighborhood you've passed 100 times without thinking about it. A freight forwarding company called Meridian Logistics, a name so forgettable it feels deliberate. A woman named Carla meets you at the side entrance. She is maybe 60, with short silver hair and a posture that suggests she has been waiting for this specific morning for a very long time. She leads you down a hallway that smells like printer ink and cold air, through a door that requires 2 keycards, and into a room with a conference table and 7 people already seated around it. 7 strangers, all of them watching you sit down. Carla closes the door. She says, your father ran 12 companies. 4 of them were legitimate. The other 8 funded an operation that has been running for 22 years. You are now the majority stakeholder in all 12. She slides a folder across the table. We have 72 hours before certain parties become aware of the transition of leadership. We need to know today whether you intend to run this or dissolve it. You look at the folder. You don't open it yet. What kind of operation, you say? Carla looks at you the way people look at someone they've decided to tell the truth to. The kind that doesn't dissolve cleanly, she says. You learn it in pieces, which is probably the only way a person can absorb it without shutting down entirely. Your father moved money. Not for one organization, but for several, a rotating constellation of interests that included a Venezuelan import-export cartel, 2 Eastern European defense contractors operating in gray markets, and a network of politically connected real estate developers who needed distance between themselves and certain municipal contracts. The freight company was the spoke at the center of the wheel. Everything passed through Meridian in some form: cash, contracts, documentation, people who needed to move without being tracked. The 4 legitimate businesses were real. The medical supply company you grew up watching him build was real, and it was profitable, and it employed 400 people, and he was genuinely proud of it. That part wasn't a lie. That was just the part he let you see. The rest of it has been running itself under Carla's management for a decade. Your father was the name and the relationships. The institutional knowledge lived in the 7 people at that table: the accountant who moved numbers through shell structures in Cyprus and the Caymans, the operations manager who ran the physical logistics, the lawyer who had never once in 22 years left a traceable document, the communications director who maintained relationships with law enforcement contacts in 3 cities. You sit with it for 2 days. You sleep in a room above the freight company. You eat food that Carla's assistant brings without being asked. You read the folder and then you read it again, and then you walk 3 circles around the building at 2 in the morning trying to locate the version of yourself that existed before the phone rang. You can't find him. On the 3rd morning, you tell Carla you'll run it. She nods, as if she expected nothing else. Your father said you would, she says. He said you were the most practical person he'd ever raised. You don't know whether to feel proud or sick. You feel both, which is something you'll learn to live with. The first test comes in the 5th week. A man named Kovacs, who manages the Eastern European accounts and has been with the operation since before you were old enough to ask where money came from, goes quiet. He misses 2 scheduled check-ins. His assistant stops returning calls. The accountant tells you Kovacs moved $14 million of operating funds into an account she doesn't recognize 3 days before he disappeared. $14 million is not a number that disappears by accident. You call a meeting. Not the full table, just Carla, the accountant, and the operations manager. You sit at the head of the table and you look at these 3 people who have been doing this since before you knew the word leverage, and you ask the only question that matters. Is he gone, or is he coming back with someone else's money behind him? The operations manager says it takes a week to find out. You tell him he has 4 days. You say it flatly, without drama, because you've learned in 5 weeks that drama in this room makes people uncertain of you. And uncertainty is the thing you can least afford. He finds out in 3. Kovacs is in Belgrade. He sold the account information to a competitor, a Croatian distribution network that has been trying to move into the operations territory for 2 years. The $14 million was a deposit on a promise. Operational routes, contact names, the payment structure with the Venezuelan account. You sit alone for an hour after you hear this. Then you make a call. Not the kind of call you're proud of. The kind of call that lives in a drawer inside you, one you will spend years not thinking about too directly. You tell the man on the other end that you need a message sent to Belgrade, not a violent one, but an unambiguous one. You need Kovacs to understand that what he sold is now worthless because every structure he compromised is being rebuilt, and that attempting to do business with the Croatian network will cost him something he cannot recover. You don't ask what form the message will take. That is a decision you make deliberately. Not knowing is a kind of insulation, and insulation is something you're learning to wear like skin. Kovacs goes quiet permanently after that. The Croatian network backs off. The operation rebuilds the compromised accounts in 11 days. You are 29 years old. You have just protected an empire you didn't know existed 60 days ago. You have done it cleanly. You have done it without leaving a fingerprint. You're not sure what that says about you. You're not sure you want to know. 6 months in, you understand the architecture. The operation doesn't run on violence. That's what surprises you most. You expected something out of a film, enforcers and threats and bodies in cars. The reality is more administrative and, in some ways, more frightening. It runs on information, on favors owed, on the specific human terror of exposure. The most powerful tool in your father's inherited arsenal is a filing system, encrypted, distributed across 4 servers in 3 countries, containing documented evidence of transactions, communications, and arrangements involving 41 people, 11 of whom hold elected office. Nobody threatens anyone. Nobody has to. The file exists, and everyone who matters knows the file exists, and that is enough. You add 2 files in your first year. Both are people who tested the operation's edges. A city contract official who got greedy on a real estate deal, a federal liaison who started asking questions outside his agreed scope. You don't use the files. You just make sure both men are quietly, efficiently made aware that the files exist. Both men stop asking questions. Power, you're learning, is mostly about what you don't have to do. By the end of the first year, the operation is running at a higher margin than it was under your father. Not because you're smarter, you're not yet, but because you're more careful. Your father trusted certain relationships because they were old. You trust structures because they're sound. You've cut 3 accounts that carried too much exposure and replaced them with cleaner arrangements that pay less but cost nothing if they come undone. Carla watches this with something close to satisfaction. He thought you'd be more sentimental, she tells you one evening, over coffee that neither of you is actually drinking. He worried about that. He should have told me, you say. He was protecting you. He was protecting himself from having this conversation. Carla says nothing, which means you're right. The question you carry everywhere, in the car, in the shower, in the 2 hours before sleep when the operational mind finally goes quiet, is whether any of this was preventable. Not the empire, not your father's choices, but your own. Because the truth you've stopped lying to yourself about is this: you chose it. You sat in that white plastic chair at the hospital and you opened an envelope and you drove to a building and you sat at a table, and when the moment came, you said yes. Nobody forced you. Nobody threatened you. The folder was full of things that should have sent you to a lawyer or a federal office or, at minimum, into the kind of deliberate ignorance that protects people who decide they don't want to know. You went in anyway, and you keep going in. Every morning you wake up in the apartment your father owned under a name that isn't his, 3 floors above a freight company that doesn't forward freight, and you open your laptop and make decisions that move money and protect relationships and sustain a structure that your father spent 22 years building. You do it well. You do it better than he did in certain measurable respects. And the only honest accounting you can give yourself is that you don't entirely hate it. That's the part that keeps you up. Not the fear. Not the moral weight of it. But the recognition, quiet and persistent as a low note, that you are not just maintaining something. You're building it, improving it, learning its logic and extending its reach. Somewhere in the last 12 months, the inherited empire stopped being your father's and started being yours. You didn't notice the moment it happened. That's probably how it's supposed to work. Tonight there's a meeting. A man is flying in from Zurich, not a contact your father ever used, a new relationship you've cultivated through a chain of introductions that took 4 months to establish. He represents a real estate interest with a significant cash movement problem and the kind of political exposure that makes conventional banking inadvisable. He needs exactly what you have. You need exactly what he brings. You sit in the car outside the restaurant for 6 minutes before going in. Not from nerves, you've been past nerves for a while now. You sit because sitting is the last quiet you'll have before the room claims your attention entirely, before you become the version of yourself that operates in that room. Measured, fluent, 2 steps ahead of what anyone is about to say. Your father was good at that. You watched him do it your whole life without understanding what you were watching. Now you know. You get out of the car. There are 23 people in the operation who depend on it for their income, their safety, their silence. There are 11 names in a file that could detonate careers and prosecutions and marriages and reputations. There are accounts in 7 countries that require ongoing management and judgment and the kind of trust that takes years to build and seconds to lose. And there is a man in a restaurant waiting to sit across from you and decide whether you are worth doing business with. You adjust your jacket. You walk toward the door. The city moves around you, oblivious, ordinary, full of people who go home at the end of the day and know exactly who they are. You used to be one of them. You're not sure what you are now, but you know exactly what you're walking into. You open the door.